Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation today. My name is Elena, and I'm very excited to share with everyone my capstone project, Toxic Tech, Washington's Pathway to Sustainable Electronic Waste Recycling. So to start off with a little bit of background, in Washington State in 2021 alone, there was 44,000 tons of e-waste produced, but shockingly, only 18% of that was actually recycled. And we know that e-waste contains both valuable recyclable components like plastics and metals, as well as toxic materials like lead and mercury. This means that managing it requires specialized systems, but unfortunately, many barriers exist, including high processing costs, which results in a lot of our e-waste being landfilled or exported, which creates environmental justice concerns as well as ecological concerns both locally and globally, as typically, especially with exportation, less developed countries are usually the ones that are shouldering the burden of all the negative impacts of our waste being dumped on them, essentially. Additionally, although Washington does have an EPR program called eCycle Washington that provides free recycling for e-waste to its residents, it has some problems with accessibility, especially in more rural areas, and an overall lack of public awareness of how it works and its benefits. So essentially, a lot less people are using it that could be using it. Over the summer, I interned with the King County Solid Waste Division with my co-intern Alec Barron, and we visited over 150 drop-off recycling sites and gathered and analyzed data at each of them, not only on electronic waste, but also on other drop-off recycling programs like for plastic film, medication, light bulbs, etc., and provided recommendations for improvement, focusing especially on accessibility. However, for my project, I decided to focus especially on electronic waste. So I conducted a literature review and interviewed 6 Washington waste management experts to answer the question of what are the opportunities and challenges in transitioning Washington's e-waste management to more sustainable practices. On the right here, you could see a picture of one of the eCycle Washington drop-off locations on Mercer Island. So residents are welcome to drop off their old electronic waste that they would like to be recycled. I identified through my research solutions that we can implement at 3 different scales. In state, we need to expand eCycle Washington to make accessibility better, prioritizing rural and underserved areas. Along with this, we need to enhance public education and awareness of what eCycle Washington is, what they do, what the options are for residents, and the importance and benefits of recycling. Lastly, at the state level, we need to invest in Washington recycling facilities to reduce the need for landfilling and exportation and support the volume that is coming through and getting dropped off at eCycle Washington locations. The national level, we need to enforce stronger tracking and auditing of recyclers to ensure compliance and e-waste being handled responsibly. And especially, we need to foster a secondhand market and foster the circular economy, which can be done through legislation mandating recycled materials to be in new electronics. So, for example, similarly to how in Washington paper bags are required to have a certain amount of post-consumer content in them, we can essentially create policies that mandate the same thing for newly sold electronics. And at the international level, I want to acknowledge that most of the environmental justice concerns do lie abroad, especially in those less developed countries with fewer environmental protections that are importing all of our trash. However, we can address the root cause by implementing these state and local solutions. Um, However, at the international level, the United States can and should ratify the Basel Convention that we are not a part of right now. And the Basel Convention is the main international piece of legislation that controls and legislates the transboundary movement of waste, including electronics. And right now, the US has not done that. So we don't have to follow it, essentially, with our waste that does exit the United States. Essentially, the ultimate goal is to transition from a linear economy to a circular economy. So instead of materials just being used once and then discarded and moving down the line into landfill, we want to transition to keeping materials in use through recycling, reuse, overall minimizing waste, and minimizing the need for raw extraction. So, so what? What are the broader implications. Why is this important? Well, environmentally, diverting e-waste from landfills is going to prevent toxic pollution, like all those toxic materials I mentioned earlier, leaching into surrounding ecosystems, environments, and communities, and also will reduce emissions from mining, refining, and all of the emissions associated with a lot of the earlier production phase of electronics. Economically, recycling will create jobs through investing in more facilities that will need labor, boosting that circular economy, and will also reduce our reliance on imports and will also help us. It's also an economic opportunity by recovering those components that have value to them. Instead of them being thrown in the trash, we're recovering things that have value. And lastly, socially, and for public health, safe e-waste management lowers exposure to hazardous chemicals if they're being properly managed, and especially for vulnerable communities near landfills and in the countries that are importing waste. This will be especially beneficial. On the right is my co-intern and I standing at the very top of the King County landfill. So we're standing on a couple 100 feet worth of trash. It doesn't look like it because it's all covered, but it's also very important to make sure that we're extending the lifespan of our regional landfill. And one of the ways that we can do that is by diverting as much waste as possible, like e-waste. I want to thank my incredible site supervisors, Hannah and Adrian and Alec, also for being the most incredible teammates and just providing me the most amazing internship experience. My faculty advisor, Megan Ibada, for all her guidance and knowledge. And of course, my family and friends for listening to me talk about trash for the last 9 months. Thank you so much.